He got hit with so many typicallys and uniques.
Well, that's unique. We don't really see that very much.
Yeah, typical or unique. Aiden was unique today, or there was
Right.
something typical today.
Oh, yes, that is very typical. We see it all the time.
Oh, don't worry about it. That's typical.
Oh, every child is unique, so we can't say what is typical.
That's typical. See you later.
We call it the typical unique conversation. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. And I think we wanted to follow up from the last episode and kind of just tie off the whole Aiden, AML, Bruton's journey.
Medical journey.
Yep. This is episode 36. So
Yeah.
36 episodes to kind of tell that story.
Yeah.
So I think we want to spend some time and reflect on maybe some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, how we felt, feelings during that time. What's Aiden doing today? How did that journey continue for him? And what's he doing these days? That's an interesting story. I think we have some things that we want to talk about. But so let's start kind of where we left off. That Aiden was cancer-free. Mm-hmm. He did have some follow-up appointments that he needed to do because, he was on a ton of pills. He still had PICC lines in his arm. He wanted to go back to school, but they held him for another year. They kept him at home.
Yeah, it's a slow process of weaning things off till he can be completely back to normal.
Exactly. And he was, I know he wanted to kind of interact with his friends. He was doing his best to try to kind of keep up with them on Skype. He'd made some new friends. I think he lost touch with some old friends. But he was just trying to survive it, right? Just trying to do the best that he could, during that time. He was held back his freshman year, not held back in the grade, but he could not physically go to school. So he did that.
He did online school at home.
Homeschooling. And when he came out of the gate with that, he did pretty good, right?
Yeah, like as soon as we got the program, because it was just do it self-paced online type of a program. And like the first day, he did a whole language arts unit and a whole unit. And in one day, I was like, oh my gosh, if you keep that up, you're going to be done by Christmas.
Exactly. So we kind of, we had school time, I guess you would call it, for him to go on the computer. And, he had to use that time to do his schoolwork. Mm-hmm. So, we saw him come out the gate pretty strong. So we thought, he's got this, and we kind of let him kind of do his own thing.
Yeah, because he's always been strong academically.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, he could just read something and then understand it, right? I don't think he needed a teacher to help him in any way. You just give him the textbook and he could absorb that and do it. I'm not that type of learner, by the way. Kim is, I'm not. So he got that from her. But, so he was able to do that. And I don't know, it was a couple months in, we wanted to kind of do a checkup, or I think we got, it
was pretty far into the year because we were kind of in freak out mode.
Yeah. And so pretty far. And I think we wanted to check to see okay, how much you have done, his progress. And, I don't know if we were looking online for grades and things like that. And we saw next to nothing.
He hadn't done anything.
and he was just taking that school time to talk to friends, play video games, and we kind of left him to his own devices because he got out the gate so well. We're like, he's going to knock this out in no time. Well, he wasn't doing anything. And I came in there one day and I was, I was typically pretty calm, but that fired me up a little bit. And I was like, look, you are going to do this amount of work.
We had to set a schedule.
Yeah, and we checked off because we worked backwards from the date that he should have been done.
Yep.
And he had to do 10 modules in a day.
Double time, triple time.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I was like, instead of doing 1 or 2 modules a day, he had to do 10. And they're like, well, you've shown you can do this. So here's what you need to do. You need to get caught up. And boy, was he upset. But to his credit, he did those 10 modules, finished everything, aced it, of course, because he's super intelligent, did a great job, and finished his freshman year. His sophomore year, he goes back to school. So we're kind of excited about that, him to kind of socially integrate. He goes back to school his freshman year, his sophomore year.
He was so excited to go back to school.
Right.
He was so excited to go back to school.
But remember, he left when, kids were a little less mature. It was more of a kid transition to adolescence, and
the first semester of his 8th grade year.
And now he's coming back to where kids are becoming adults.
They're starting to drive.
Yeah, and he's like still in that transition from elementary to junior high, and they went through all that experience, and now they're starting to drive and becoming adults and getting jobs, and he didn't make that transition real well. And sophomore year, there were some issues. Junior year, we'll talk about later, some issues. And to the point that Carly kind of came to us and said, look, this is, I go to school with this kid, every day, and I'm freaking out, man. He's just totally embarrassing me.
He started to struggle.
Yeah, he really started to struggle just because, he just didn't have that interaction. But, we'll get into some of that, when we maybe talk about mental health and stuff like that. But, understand that he was behind the 8 ball, and, to his credit, he tried to do the best that he could, but the cards weren't in it for him.
And we didn't know this at the time, except when Carly would come, but it was more of I'm the sibling and he's annoying and embarrassing kind of a thing, But now looking back, hindsight, we have a clear picture of what was going on, but we didn't at the time.
At the time, sophomore and junior year, I think senior year, we started getting some feedback from teachers and peers and other folks that there was a big event that happened that we had to address, and it caused a bunch of other things. But that really didn't rear its ugly head until, his senior year. So it was just little things up until then. But we're still at this point, we're celebrating Aiden being cancer-free, and
back to normal. Like literally, there was a day when the nurse practitioner who was overseeing his whole case looked at me and said, "That's it. He's a normal kid. Treat him like a completely normal kid."
Yep.
So, and then that's when he got to go back to school.
Yeah, and he, he had kind of a group of friends, that he'd like to hang out with. We kind of drove him places. He ended up getting his driver's license. Got his first speeding ticket. All that stuff. Everything. First job. So a lot of that was, just to see these milestones for him was. Yeah. We didn't have that thought a couple years ago.
Yeah. We didn't know we were going to get to this place.
We didn't think that this would happen. So, very proud of a lot of things he did. He was always excellent in school. When he applied himself, he could get A's if he wanted, but he knew if I can get B's and still pass and go to college and all that stuff, I'll take the B's.
Yeah, there's some kids that they're so smart they know the minimum requirement for what they need to do, and then they'll just do that just to.
And that was Aiden. That was Aiden. He literally could have aced everything. He could have been valedictorian if he wanted to be. He was literally is still to this day literally that smart. But so that was part of it. I think him interacting with us at home was very, I think we were just happy that he was there. He was starting to try new things, like we kind of joked about pizza and things. Like he was actually trying new things, and I would always think, is this Aiden or is this the donor's DNA that is causing him or helping him to do some of these things? So there was a lot of hope through that time. Aiden actually finished his senior year of high school in half a year.
Early. Yep.
Yep.
Half
so,
a year.
So he finished by December. And, there's a big story around that. But his birthday's in December. And so he'd be 18. He wanted to graduate, in December, as well. So he would be kind of fully on his own, make his own decisions. He has that philosophy of, being an emancipated youth, and so, we understood that, and, we didn't love it, but we understood it. And that was part of what we preached, like, hey, we're legally responsible for you till you're 18 or you graduate from high school. So he made it his mission to be 18 and graduate from high school in the same month. Was that a fair statement?
Yeah, looks that way.
Yep. So Aiden had graduated by December. He wanted to kind of be on his own, which he was legally allowed to do. He had satisfied, all the legal requirements. And we started talking about what's your next steps? How can we help you? We encouraged him to go to college. So because he had that time off from December to the end of the school year, May, June timeframe, we had said, hey, Aiden, you've had some time off. Why don't you go to college now, in June? So start with the very first summer program at Kent State University. Mm-hmm. And, I said, look, you could live in the dorms.
At the main campus.
At the main campus.
Accepted.
Yeah. And so he went to Kent State. He stayed at the main campus.
They placed him in like the honors dorms. Like he did really well. He got academic money, financial aid money just for academics. So yeah, he did really well.
So when he went to college, he lived there year round. He went to school year round.
Yeah.
He graduated in 3 years. That's Kim's alma mater, by the way, too. So she was very proud.
He's a legacy.
Yeah, he's a legacy. So he graduated in 3 years with 2 degrees.
Yeah, he got 2 degrees in 3 years.
Yep, at a
state school.
State major university. So
yeah, major university.
Kudos, and the degrees are poli-sci, political science, and sociology. I keep saying psychology, but it's sociology. So, he got those 2 degrees. He had even done some internships at the time. He had traveled a little bit to kind of, he wanted to be kind of a union rep a little bit. I think that was a cause that was near and dear to his heart.
I worked on a political campaign, a local.
Local political campaign. So he was, integrating a little bit, doing these things. I think he had an interview for something that he really wanted to do. He unfortunately didn't get that position, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, and gosh, I hope someday we can really talk about it with him, deep inner feelings, because those conversations are few and far between, but we do have them. But I would love to understand why that was the stopping point for him.
Yeah.
And
it can be anybody who's gone through an interview and you don't get the position, you have that moment of, it's a little gut punch, crushing. But if that's something that's you're very sensitive to emotionally, whether you're aware or not aware, that can really affect you. So we can maybe think that's what it is, but we don't know. We don't have a way to know.
No, and only he can tell us, and and Aiden will sit down with us on occasion and have those very thoughtful conversations. Sometimes he's not in the mood, and we have to read the room to know when is that time and when it isn't. But I think that's something that we'd always like to find out. But after that. And Kim can explain it better than I do, but he was kind of wanting to be in a communal society.
He just was done with traditional living, to put it, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to follow the stereotypical norms. He didn't want to get a job. He didn't want to climb that ladder.
He didn't want to be on the grid.
Not on the grid. So I wanted him to be safe. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I just said, well, there are places out there. There's like communes that you could go to if that's the lifestyle that you want to live. There's places for that. So he did set out on that path for a while, and he toured around to a different, traveled to a few different communes on the East Coast. So he was away, but out on his own, just trying things out. So he did that until the pandemic hit.
Yeah, and then we were like, hey, can we get you to... Well, let me set up a little bit how we communicate with Aiden. So Aiden's off the grid, right? Kim put together a little, thing with Aiden that said, I will give you a phone, I will pay for the phone, but you have to call us once a week.
Stay in touch. I wanted to stay in touch.
Yeah. So typically it'd be Sundays that they would have, a hour call, and they would talk. So Kim would be like, hey, I'm calling Aiden, and we chit chat and find out what's going on. But he was doing this communal living. We would keep in touch with him about once a week. He had told us that he really didn't want to stay in contact, but would be willing to if we were to provide him the phone, that he would stay in contact with us. So you got to imagine how that makes us feel, especially going through what we've been through, and it's our firstborn child, my namesake, there's a lot of feeling and emotion that, might get me right now, but there's a lot of feeling and emotion in that. And we were willing to take whatever he was willing to give us. Right. So, so he did that for a little while. Then after he left one of those communities, he came home for a little bit, and it was during the pandemic.
I mean, he made it home right the day that they were shutting down, like all the transportation.
He took a bus,
because he took a public bus, and that was, if he would have been a day later, that bus wouldn't have been available.
Probably
so we
not.
would have had to truck it across a couple states to go get him. So it was good timing.
But
and then he got to be home for a while.
Yeah, so he came home, and he was not looking great. He had been out roughing it for a long time, and I was like, oh my God, you need to undress in the garage. You need to go straight upstairs. Kim bought him some new clothes. And, I think at that point we were like, wow, I get it. I like that, people live that way, but it's not our lifestyle. But we cast no dispersions on him for his lifestyle. And still to this day, we may not love it, but if that's how he wants to live, we're all for it. We support that. We're okay with that. So he came home. We kind of hung out for a while. He ended up leaving again.
But it was good to have him home.
Yeah. And
it was really good. We had some really good time together, hanging out, talking. It was nice.
It was probably the first time we really got to dive deep into a lot of the things that were going on in his life and understand him a little bit better. But so, we dove deep into some of that, but then he left again. And then he was a traveler. So define traveler.
We had to learn all this lingo and what all this stuff means.
Kim looked it all up. She knows what this is.
Yeah, it was a little terrifying, but yeah, just basically that, just traveling. And a lot of times by trains that you probably shouldn't be on.
Yeah. So he did that for a little while. Ended up coming back again because I think the group that he was traveling with, it was a few people. It wasn't just him on his own, but he was traveling with the group.
He had two people that he was traveling with.
And then they kind of stopped being a traveler, and he was like, I'll come home for a couple weeks and kind of reset and think about what I want to do.
Yep.
He came home.
And when they were out traveling, they went out west that time. So he got to explore some parts of California and Nevada. Yep. And saw some pretty amazing things out
on his journey.
That way,
So he ended up. So he did a lot of the traveling. He ended up coming home again. He purchased a bike and told us he wanted to go to Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. So we're like, okay. So he got this bike. We boxed it up, right? Because he was going to bike to Portland at first. He made it to Euclid, which is about 40 miles from where we are today.
He made it far, but then he got like the tire busted or
The
something.
tire broke. So he's like, I'm not going to make it to Portland, Oregon. So we got him a bus ticket, wrapped up his bike. He put the bike on the bus and he went to Portland, Oregon, and he has been there ever since. And how many years has been? 2 to 3?
So 2 years.
2 years now. So he's in Portland. He doesn't have an official residence, but he's making do. And
he's met people out there, and he has friends, and he has his little schedule where he does things to take care of himself and socialize. So yeah, and we keep in touch.
Yep.
So that's all I can ask for.
That's it. So that's where Aiden is today. You know, we have a lot more things that, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, in some other episodes. But I think as far as, you know, the cancer, for him to get through that, you know, and him to be where he is today, you know, it's not traditional, but for Aiden, it's what he wants. And for us, even though we don't love it, we love it for him, because he's told us, he's like, you know, I know you may not love this lifestyle that I'm leading, but I feel comfortable. You know,
it makes him feel good.
Comfortable. Yeah, because I don't feel comfortable in traditional society and anxiety and things like that. I want to live this lifestyle, you know, and we have to respect it. You know, we may not love it, but we have to respect it, and we keep in touch, and that's all we can ask for at this point. So with all that as the backdrop and that 35 episodes and a half, Kim, what is your kind of synopsis of all of this? Like, how could you kind of tie this into a bow, into, you know, maybe how you felt and where you are today?
Well,
with just
it's a roller coaster of emotions, because you go from completely terrified, is he gonna survive this, to so thankful and relieved, oh my God, he survived this, to, oh no, what's happening? It can't, you know, these things shouldn't be happening. You know, you want that like fairy tale, you know, happily ever after, everything that you thought would happen would happen.
What did you think would happen? So tell us that.
I, you know, was raised with the traditional expectations of what life should be like, you know, and stereotypical roles and stereotypical society, and you get married and you have kids and you get a job and, you know, all of that. So
we're babies of boomers.
Yes. And, you know, you're going to have grandkids, and then you're going to retire, and then you're going to, just, you know, all of that. So we have, you know, had to learn as adults to let go of that stuff and be thankful for what we have and where we're at. So it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean I still don't mourn those things. Like I often I'm gonna get upset.
It's okay. We're all friends here.
You got me. But I just have days where I, you know, see my friends or my peers, and your children grow up and have certain milestones, you know, and when you've dreamed of those, but I know it's my dream. It's not my kid's dream. And I understand that. I'm okay with it. But it still doesn't mean that I still don't have those feelings sometimes. So my struggle is to have those feelings. You have to have them, you know, and just work through, you know, feel them and then be okay afterwards. And that's what I'll do right now.
Well, we say that all the time to each other, right? If we're sad, let's be sad. Let's feel that emotion. You know, it's okay to be sad. Doesn't mean we don't love our son any less, you know, because we may not see a traditional lifestyle for him doesn't mean that we, you know, well, you can't be in our lives because, you're like this. No, we want, every part he's willing to give us, and we cherish that. And
we miss him.
And we miss him. I mean, he is a very intelligent person. I mean, we have had, especially when I was in the hospital, I'm going to segue to me now, unless you have anything else. But when we were in the hospital, I mean, we had a lot of really deep conversations that you can have with a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, right? But we had a lot of those opportunities to have those conversations when, Aiden was younger. I mean, he was by my side all the time. Like, he was my kid. Like, she had nothing to do with that. Like, I know, but we were like, we were tied at the hip. We were going to do everything together. We played video games together. We did, and it was just such a radical change, everything that happened, with his illness and, starting with the Brutons, going on to the cancer, and just him trying to become or find out who he is. And how that affected me was I was losing that person, that connection that we had for such a long time. And I knew that I had to, at some point he's going to go and be his own person and do his own thing. But I always wanted to hold on to that, for us. And, I think I never expressed a lot of how I felt about that in the moment, so I don't know if Kim knew a lot about this. So
I don't think any of us knew anything. We didn't do a good job at all of communicating anything when we came out of the bone marrow transplant.
Yeah. And so I had feelings and emotions that I just didn't share, and that were weighing on me through this time that, I chose not to share them. I don't think we were in a great place to talk about us when we're dealing with all the stuff with him, and I was mourning the loss of a child, and I was going through other issues in my life at the time, and there was a lot of stuff going on that was really hard for me because, Kim knows this about me today. So come to today, I feel like it's my job to be the rock. It's my job to be the provider. It's my job to be the one that everybody runs to with all the problems and I fix. And if I have a problem, we can't deal with your problem right now, Carlos, because Aiden's has issues. I'm having issues. Carly's having issues. So even if I would have brought some of those things up, it wouldn't have been well received because we didn't have the tools back then to receive them. And, so I struggled through a lot of that, during that time. But to me, it kind of all started with Aiden, the helpless feeling, the loss of some of that relationship that we had, that was hard on me. I can't explain it eloquently enough right now, but it was very hard on me at the time. And I kept grasping for that. And, it just kept getting further and further away. And, there's a lot of penance that I have to pay in my life. And I think in retrospect, looking back today, I wish I would have done a lot of things differently.
Oh yeah, we both feel that way.
And we talk about this now, some 10, 12, 13 years later, we can talk about this now and say, man, if I was back in that situation, knowing what I know today, I would have done so many things different. But at the time, what you know.
Yeah.
And, it was a painful period for us. And even though we came out of it celebrating Aiden's, cancer-free, and that was a bunch to celebrate.
Yep.
There was still a lot of fractures and cracks in both of us, in our entire family. I won't even just keep it to us. we had fractures with, our parents, our siblings, they were as great as they could be during that time, but they didn't know. They didn't know what the heck was going on. And, they could just do what they could do. And sometimes you want somebody to reach out to you and say, how can I help you? And a lot of times we were like going to people around us and saying, can you help us?
Yeah.
I need your help.
There was a lot. So when Aiden went back into high school, and we feel like there were some struggles there, right? But we don't know because he didn't tell us. And, he wouldn't talk about it. We didn't really know to ask too much. Maybe we would ask, but then if it didn't go any further, we would just drop it. We're having our own issues. It just was hard to know what to do because we just didn't know.
Yeah. And I think we spent a good amount of time post cure, right? So we're on the other side of this, but things aren't going perfectly. That was a petri dish for us starting to point the finger at each other, a little bit about just little stupid things, like, hey, mental illness, that runs in your family, and, cancer runs in your family, and, just stupid little petri dish things that turned into something ridiculous.
So here's one of the things that I struggled with. So I was very protective and, hyper vigilant in the hospital and trying to get him to be cured. So then he's cured and he's back in the hospital or back at school. And I was trying to have that release, right? To back off. He's in high school, let him have some of that freedom. Like, he's alive, like, let him live. But then now looking back in hindsight, I'm like, did I give too much freedom? I wasn't aware of everything that was going on. I should have done more things. I wish if one professional that had been encountering him during that time would have noticed something, and let me know. But there's a lot. There's a lot that I wish.
Well, you're touching on some things that we're going to talk about, but there were people who knew certain things and didn't tell us.
Yeah.
And that is painful for us as well. But, for the most part, I think we got through it. We got through it as a family. We supported each other. We all cried during this. We all argued during this. We all hugged and celebrated with each other when, things went well. It was a difficult time. I wish this on nobody. Even the patients, childhood cancer is just, I can't understand it. I don't understand why this exists. But even the families that have to go through it, this is painful. There are people that we know from Rainbows still that, their life just isn't the same. Mm-mm. It's not the same, after going through this. It takes a toll. And, I'm happy we're here today. There's a lot of story between that day and today that we'll get into. But, I'm happy we're here today because I think our love for each other brought us here today. There were a lot of things that should have fractured all of this, but our love for each other brought us here today. And speaking of love, it's a different kind of love, but I also have love for the donor. At the end of the day, our medical journey would not have ended without this donor.
No, he's the reason that Aiden was cured.
Yeah, and with him having a 15% chance of survival, this bone marrow transplant was it. They were talking about not even doing this because Aiden had so much chemo, so much medicine that organs were about to shut down. Like this was it.
Yep.
And this donor had to come through for us. They did. I think we should spend an episode celebrating this person, and we'll tell you everything we know about this person.
There's a lot of special moments around that
Yeah.
too.
And so, yes, I think we're mourning a lot of, maybe what could have been, and gosh, why did we have to go through this? The why me? But I'm happy that we made it through.
Oh yeah, that's
And
number one.
And I'm happy that we can celebrate it with maybe somebody outside of our immediate family who's now DNA connected to us. So I'd like to talk about this person in our next episode, and we'll kind of wrap up the whole Bruton's AML. We even have, and hopefully we can show it the next episode, we have a Miracle Network spot that showed during the Oprah Winfrey show of a clip
As a commercial
that Aiden did. That was featuring Aiden when he first got Bruton. So he was a little kid. We have that special. So hopefully we can show that, kind of how everything started. And then we'll kind of end with the donor and how this whole Bruton's AML things, we can kind of bookend it real nice and move on to some other topics.
That's what we have planned for our next episode. So we hope you join us back for that. And we'll see you then.
All right, bye.
Bye.